Trump is increasingly, however, someone who considers his political opponents the enemy, is permanently out for revenge, and is increasingly unstable and unhinged. His enemies list has grown longer. His rhetoric has grown more extreme.
According to new reporting from ProPublica, Russell Vought, a former Trump White House aide and the co-author of Project 2025, has plans to deploy the military in response to domestic unrest and put career civil servants, quote, in trauma. Joining us now, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissmann. He's a New York University law professor and former FBI general counsel. He's also co-host of the MSNBC podcast Prosecuting Donald Trump. Here we are.
Andrew Weissmann. I mean, just like, can I just say, apparently, my conservative media friends and conservative folks are saying that the media writ large, the liberal media, has taken Donald Trump's comments out of context yet again when it relates to Liz Cheney, as though Donald Trump has not regularly talked about, turning the levers of the investigative powers of the Department of Justice onto his enemies, as though he has not amplified things like a firing squad and military tribunals. He has look it up on a social media site. Are we making it up, Andrew Weissmann? Should we be concerned? Are the Justice Department folks that Donald Trump hires, that they're just going to do their good duty because, he's going to hire the best people? This is just liberal outrage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one where you don't have to really think about sort of what possibly could happen and sort of speculate. You can look at what happened when he was president. You can look at what is said in Project 2025 about reproductive rights, their plans there. You can look at the eradication of LGBTQ protections, the elimination of career people, the fact that the President of the United States gets to tell the Department of Justice, if he chooses, to say, you know what, you should prosecute these people, but not those people. So if there's crimes against enemies, the Department of Justice can just say, we're not going to prosecute that. The president can pardon people. You can have the president do what he's already suggested he might do, which is to say, commit crimes, but don't worry, not only we will not prosecute you, but I will pardon you. And the litany of things that the president can do that are completely antithetical to the rule of law is really stunning. And it's not speculation. You can just look at Project 2025. You can look at what he did when he was president, and you can look at the language that he is currently using.
Let's talk about what we can expect just in the next few days. I want you to look at two different things side by side. So first, you have the Harris campaign saying that they fully expect Trump to declare victory before the votes are counted. They're prepared for that. And then I want you to listen to what Steve Bannon is using to sort of whip up his folks. This is from the War Room on Tuesday. Take a listen.
They are signaling you right now what they're going to do. Every day with you see, we're going to delay, we can't count the vote for 7 days. We're going to take mail-in ballots 5 days later. Every day after the evening of November 5th is going to be Stalingrad, where Mark Elias is in court, and they're going to do this to slow it down. If they can't take it away from Trump, if they can't nullify it right there, they want to at least delegitimize his victory.
So what we have actually heard from Democrats, from Mark Elias himself, is it will take time to count these votes properly. And there's some expectation management around the fact that we may not go to bed. You and I are never going to, we're not going to sleep for another 3 weeks, but on Tuesday night. And instead, they are trying to act as though there is a plot on the Democratic side to delegitimize this election.
So one, let's just understand that there are certain states, just to take Pennsylvania, they can't actually start counting a whole series of votes until the election day. So that's one of the reasons for delay. Second, we can look at exactly what Donald Trump has previously done, which is the sort of stop the count. because he thinks that he may be ahead because of the so-called red mirage. There may be less of a red mirage this time, but if there's a red mirage, what he previously did is say stop the count. Just to be clear, that is illegal.
Yes.
To say that. That is a violation of both the obstruction statute and the civil rights statutes federally. So, but you will hear exactly that, thinking if you can stop the incoming votes, it won't cause the Democrats to win. That is illegal. You have to count all votes. So I fully expect that if Donald Trump thinks that he's ahead at the start, and there are more sort of, mail-in ballots, absentee ballots that are coming in that are going to favor the Democrats, he's going to be doing exactly what he has already done, which is say, stop the count. And it's actually, voter fraud, when in fact, the voter fraud is saying, don't count the votes.
So, okay. Who you say it's illegal to get up and declare, stop the counting, I won. Who's going to enforce that? Because at the end of the day, I've heard so much stuff about Donald Trump being illegal, and everybody think they're going, and nobody enforces it. And then when they do, the courts go, oh, no, he can do it. He can do it anyway. So, this is why I think what Mark Elias and third-party groups out there in the democracy space have been doing is setting up the phalanx and the battle armaments to go into courts to really drive the messaging, because we know the politics is going to say one thing, Andrew.
Yep.
Donald Trump's going to get out there at 8:15, 8:20, 8:30 and say, oh, guess what? I'm ahead. I won. We're done. Right. That's illegal, folks, just so per Andrew. But it don't mean jack.
Right. So, great question. So there are a couple things. So there could be private parties. There can be the campaigns. We know that the Harris campaign is loaded for bear. I mean, they are ready to make sure that everyone's vote is counted. And so they have plans in place. People should, not overreact. And then the other thing that can happen is the Department of Justice. And that's the trickiest, because when the Department of Justice, if they were to go in, there will be claims of one, Merrick Garland may be, I'm sitting this out, I don't want to have claims of politicization. The problem is, if there is something illegal going on, everyone's going to be thinking, where is the department?
Can I add something, though, to this, which is this, to me, seems like the moment where you do need titans of industry and titans of culture to come out and say, there's a way that we do this in a democracy, right? So when you hear Ian Bassin talking about autocratic capture and why it is that you have all these billionaires either endorsing Trump or sitting this thing out, withholding newspaper endorsements, what's done is done. There might come a moment where we will need those social rallying cries even bigger than any one institution.
I keep on thinking about Cassidy Hutchinson. There you have a young woman who is showing more courage, more gumption with her entire future ahead of her than, in my opinion, like Jeff Bezos. People need to stand up. This is a democracy, and as Nancy Pelosi likes to say, it's a democracy if we can keep it. And the way you keep it is not worrying about your pocketbook and not being sort of subjected to the fear that Donald Trump is trying to engender. You have to really, if the point of, if it looks like this is what's going on, where people's votes are not counted, people have to stand up. And that's when where, the electorate matters. That's where people, like at the ground level, can make a huge difference.
Ground game. Simone, that's how you win it.
The ground game, the people. The people have the power. I know it may not feel that way, but the people have the power in this representative democracy. We give the jobs to the elected officials. They work for us, so folks should exercise their vote. Don't
we need
allow
to take a few of those
the intimidation
jobs back, Simone.
to work. Well, talk about it now.